Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Around the nation right here, TYT Nation. Happy Tuesday. Hope everybody had a good Monday, Friday, and the weekend in between. Good to be back. Got a lot of stuff to cover. We'll, of course, talk about Mitt Romney. That's going to be a fun story. I absolutely love that story. We'll talk about that. Then we've got a couple of stories on gun control, including the Trump administration possibly looking into lifting CDC research bans. What? Interesting. Very interesting, actually. But I'm a little wary. Then, of course, we have how the American people feel about mass shootings, and specifically how they feel about Congress and how they're not actually doing anything on gun control. So we'll be talking about that today. Then we've got some Russiagate. Yeah, we're going to talk about Russiagate. We got Bernie Sanders responding to the Mueller indictments. That's going to be interesting. And then we have, well, let's see. We'll talk about who loves to meddle in elections more. Is it Russia or the United States? Oh, that's an interesting question. We're going to deep dive into election meddling, America versus Russia. Very, very interesting. We got scholars. We got former CIA people talking about meddling. So that's going to be fun. So that, look, we got a great show today. So stick around. You don't want to miss it. Okay, before we get into the stories, of course, I want to thank the patrons, patreon.com/TYTNation. You want to support us. Another fantastically awesome way to support us is to the Super Chat. So I'm going to try to figure out ways to encourage you guys to use the Super Chat because it's pretty fucking cool. I've used Super Chat before. I support I supported Ron Pacone through Super Chat. And it's just a fantastic way to support creators without having to go through like extra sites and things like that. So use the Super Chat. It does help out. And thank you to everybody who has used the Super Chat. That's, of course, Nicholas, Kieran. You guys are fantastic. You're awesome. I can always count on support from you guys. And thank you so much for using that. I want to try and do something special for people who use Super Chat, whether it be reading your comments or things like that. Maybe doing some, I don't know, poll questions. I don't know. We'll figure things out. And if you have any ideas on what you would like to see me do for the Super Chat, great. Please let me know. All right. Maybe you can send a Super Chat. Okay. Anyway. Stories. Let's start out with fun. Let's go to Mitt Romney. Oh God. You know you guys are going to love this. All right. So, hey, there's a race coming up in Utah for the Senate seat currently occupied by Orrin Hatch. Of course, Orrin Hatch, he's retiring at the end of his term. Might have something to do with Donald Trump. Might have something actually to do with the fact that he actually helped get the giant tax cuts for the rich passed, signed into law. I mean, it might have something to do with it. In fact, that was a Republican priority for time immemorial to pass enormous tax cuts for the rich, 83% of which went to the top 1%. Of course, Orrin Hatch's donors are very, very thrilled. Republican donors, absolutely thrilled. And so a lot of these Republicans are like, mission accomplished, hang the banner. We have done what we have come to do, which is cut taxes for our donors. Okay, so now there's this seat opening up, and here comes Mitt Romney on his dancing horse, Rafalka, in order to run for this seat. So he recently made the announcement that he's running, and he got a surprise endorsement. Interesting. This endorsement, by the way, came from none other than President Donald J. Trump. He tweeted, Mitt Romney has announced he is running for the Senate from the wonderful state of Utah. He will make a great senator and worthy successor to Orrin Hatch and he has my full support and endorsement. Oh boy. So why do I say that? Why is this weird? Well, look, if you haven't been following politics, and I don't blame you because it's a shit show, Donald Trump and Mitt Romney have a bit of a history, a little bit of acrimony in this new budding bromance between Trump and Romney. Now, Romney had criticized Trump during the campaign trail, once calling him even a fraud. He said Donald Trump is a phony, a fraud. His promises are as worthless as a degree from Trump University. And he said that, look, if I ever got an endorsement from Donald Trump, I'd shut it down. Quote, if Trump had said this, had said 4 years ago the things that he says today about the KKK, Muslims, Mexicans, disabled, I would not have accepted his endorsement. Interesting. So, how's Romney going to respond? Well, hold on. Before I get to that, there's a couple more quotes here that I think are super, super relevant. For one, Donald Trump, of course, did not take these insults from Romney lying down. He said Romney was, and this is alluding to his loss in 2012 to Barack Obama, he called Romney one of the dumbest and worst candidates in the history of Republican politics. Ouch. Harsh. And then he said, again, this one's super relevant, he was begging for my endorsement. I could have said, Mitt, drop to your knees. And he would have dropped to his knees. Look, man, that's pretty harsh. So that brings me to this. Mitt Romney, his response. Thank you, Mr. President, for the support. I hope that over the course of the campaign, I also earned the support and endorsement of the people of Utah. Wait a minute. I thought that you were going to take his endorsement. I thought he was, what, a fraud, a phony, a fake, that his promises are as worthless as a degree at Trump University. It looks like Donald Trump, Donald Trump's endorsement may have turned Mitt Romney. You know why? It's because I think it might be politically convenient. But see, this shows who Mitt Romney actually is. And this is something that I think we've always known about Mitt Romney, that he's kind of a worm, right? He's an opportunistic person. Okay, he has no principle. Now, it's opportunism to attack a president when he's extremely unpopular. Okay, but it's also an opportunism to take an endorsement from that very same president now that his approval ratings have gone up a little bit. Interesting. So not only is his popularity up a little bit, but among Republicans, his popularity is up to 90%. So Donald Trump is extremely popular with the Republican base. And here you got Mitt Romney. Now he's running for office. Now he's bending the knee. Which brings me to this. Go ahead. Tell him your name. Oh, man. It's good to be back. Moving on. Okay. Now, following the mass shooting in Florida that claimed the lives of 17 people, that both including students and teachers at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, one of Trump's cabinet might be breaking with the Republicans on the issue of at least gun violence research. Now, interesting. Now, Politico is reporting that Secretary of Health and Human Services Alex Azar recently opened the door to expanding federal gun violence research. Interesting. Now, they said that right now the CDC is unable to do research into gun violence. However, Azar told an Energy and Commerce subcommittee that a provision passed 2 decades ago limiting the CDC's work on gun violence only prevents it from taking an advocacy position, not from doing research. So that's interesting. So basically he's looking at a loophole. Like, well, I mean, it says we can't advocate, but that doesn't mean that we can't do research. Again, that's super interesting coming from Alex Azar, Donald Trump's pick. Now, he says, my understanding is that the writer does not in any way impede our ability to conduct our research mission. We're in the science business and the evidence generating business. And so I will have our agency certainly working in this field as they do across the broad spectrum of disease control and prevention. He also says that we believe we've got a very important mission with our work with serious mental illness, as well as our ability to do research on the causes of violence and the causes behind the tragedies like this. So that is a priority for us. Now, of course, that writer that he references is in a 1996 amendment that prevented the CDC from collecting data to advocate for gun control. So they're talking about advocacy here, right? Now, what is advocacy when you kind of break it down? Well, it depends on who you ask. If you ask Republicans that are funded by the NRA, just pointing out statistical facts seems to be advocacy for gun control. If you point out that if you have more guns in your house, you are more likely to be killed by said gun or likely to kill your family members with that gun, they'll point that out and say, "What? You're advocating for gun control. How dare you? You're not allowed to do that." So this makes me wonder what kind of facts and research are they actually going to put out? Because again, we're talking about the Trump administration. So anyway, the conservatives, they did not like the fact that the CDC wanted to do research on the causes of gun violence, the causes of mass shootings. So, and it makes you wonder, why didn't they like the CDC doing that in the first place? Could it be what they would find? It could find that here in America, we are drowning in a sea of guns. We have more guns than people in an increasingly small amount of hands. Now, that's strange. That would seem to point out that less and less Americans are owning guns, but there's a small section of Americans where all the guns seem to be going to. Weird. It's almost as if there are people that are, I don't know, prepping for an armed conflict with the government or police or things like that. Well, that can't possibly be happening, can it? I think we all know the answer to that one. But look, hey, any research could show that, no, it's not the fact that we're drowning in guns. In fact, we need more guns. We need to arm more people. I don't know. It could show that. The point is that the Republicans, thanks to that writer, made sure the CDC couldn't do the research on the guns. But here's Alex Azar saying, actually, no, that's not quite true. I actually do intend to look at the causes of gun violence. I'm hoping this is true. But the whole point is, why are conservatives so afraid of research? Like, I already know the NRA's response to this. Hell no. Because whatever you come up with is going to advocate for gun control. Well, that would mean that the facts are not on your side, if that's the case. But again, look, this is the Trump administration, so I have to admit that I'm wary of anything that comes out of it. Because as I said before, Trump is a serial liar. And a lot of his cabinet members are also serial liars, but at the same time, facts don't lie. And so there is that. I mean, look, they are stubborn things. The facts are. So, look, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm wary, but this actually might be good news. We'll see what develops. We'll see what actually comes out of this. But tentatively hopeful. And we can take it at that. Okay. We've got more. So there is a new poll out that shows that Americans are very, very unhappy with President Trump as well as congressional actions on mass shootings. Now, congressional action, I would actually point out that there is no congressional action, and that is why people are angry. Now, according to a new Washington Post ABC News poll, more than 3/4 of respondents said that Congress is not doing enough to stop mass shootings. Now, 60% said the same of President Donald Trump. Well, President Trump, to be fair, there's not a lot he can do, not without the actions of Congress. So I actually agree more so that the problem lies with Congress and not specifically with Donald Trump. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not his fault when he vetoes any sort of things. And look, we're also going to look at his budget as well, which, again, I'll get into the details of what it cuts when it comes to guns, gun safety, mental health, and things like that, which are important factors. So Trump's not entirely blameless, but at the same time, I think most people got it right that this is a problem with Congress not even bringing up anything to vote on. Now, more findings. Of those polled, 62% said Trump is not doing enough to prevent mass shootings. 77% said the same of Congress. Okay, that's what we just went over. So Congress is doing nothing, and they are still committed to doing nothing, and people are pissed. So let me break this down, because country wants solutions, right? However, we're a little bit divided on what kind of solutions we want. Now, for example, 50% said they would support a nationwide ban on so-called assault weapons. These are guns like AR-15s and other semi-automatic military-style rifles. Now, 46% of respondents said they would oppose such a ban. Now, 58% of respondents said that they believe stricter gun control laws could have prevented last week's shootings, so that's actually quite a majority, compared with 37% who said that tighter laws would not have prevented it. So that's actually pretty good. So you have a majority of the country saying that, yes, we should ban AR-15s and other so-called assault weapons, and also we should have tighter gun control measures. I think that would include things like high-capacity magazine bans, universal background checks, waiting periods, mental health screens, and things like that. They think that those would have prevented those shootings. Now, interestingly enough, that is the more liberal position. Nowhere in there is ban all guns, melt them down, and make a statue of a kneeling football player. No, that's not in the liberal position. Yes, there are some people on the liberal side that do think that is a solution. But I think in America, and I've said this before, I don't necessarily think that's going to happen because our culture is not ready for it. It is a culture problem. And unfortunately, I believe that we're a culture of death, that we are obsessed with fear, that we are a fearful nation. We're fearful of each other. We're fearful of the other. And that, of course, makes it very, very hard for people to want to voluntarily give up the guns. And that's the only way that we would ever actually get any sort of gun control laws. Let's take Australia, for example. They had one mass shooting, and most Australians said, okay, you know what? It's not worth this shit. Let's get here. Just take the guns. Take them. That's not going to happen in America, at least not anytime soon. Same thing happened in the UK. They also had a shooting, a mass shooting. I believe it was in a school, but I'm not entirely sure. They're like, okay, yeah, take them. This shit isn't worth it. But here in America, we're like, no, we don't care. We're still going to keep our guns because I'm afraid of, black guy over there. I'm afraid of the Mexican over there, and I'm afraid of the Muslim that I think is going to come blow me up. So how dare you take my guns? I'm also afraid of the government becoming tyrannical and taking my rights. Well, to be fair, the government's already taken some of your rights. The right of habeas corpus, for example. And then, of course, we live in a surveillance state. The Fourth Amendment rights are being abridged all the time. Illegal search and seizure, on and on and on and on and on. But nonetheless, there are people that think, no, I've got to arm myself to protect myself against the government. That would explain why a lot of the guns are congregating into the hands of only a few people. Because these people are stockpiling because they think, don't worry, I'm going to take on the government with my AR-15. Okay, well, congratulations on being an idiot. Because you ain't going to stop a Predator drone, buddy. No. Anyway. So look, the liberal position is modest to strict gun control laws. Just saying, hey man, let's yes, we're going to have our guns, but We can take certain guns off the market that are more deadly, that could be modded into fully automatic rifles with bump stocks, for example, what they used in the Vegas shooting. And we can do, ban these high-capacity magazines and just things to make what are already deadly instruments a little less deadly and make sure that less of them get in the hands of the mentally ill. So that's, I think, a fairly popular position. What is an unpopular position, as I said before, is banning guns. That ain't never going to happen, not in today's culture. Now, the Republican position is more guns everywhere. Let's arm teachers, for example. I've seen this argument all the time. If we just arm the teachers, then the teachers could go and, since they're the good guy with a gun, they should be able to stop all the attackers. Well, for one, again, that personally doesn't make sense, because if you're in that kind of situation, look, even if you have a gun, that doesn't negate the element of surprise. Most mass shooters, they walk in and nobody expects them there, obviously. And so you catch somebody by surprise before they can draw, before they can aim. They're dead. You're dead. And then guess what? They get another gun to continue their rampage. So arming teachers to me doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. But I'm sure it's people just being like, hey, look, I want to make sure that there's somebody there to protect kids. I understand why, but to me it doesn't make sense when you actually look at what's going on. And not only that, but we hardly even pay teachers enough to actually do their job. Now you're adding another job onto that, which is to be basically an armed enforcer against mass shooters. And to me, that doesn't make any sense. Now you're entrusting them with even more responsibility. By the way, does that come with a pay increase? Does that cover all the costs for training? And for, to keep that weapon around, to make sure that they buy ammunition. But why are we buying ammunition for teachers when we're not buying pencils and pens for the students, books and computers and things like that? It really just shows how messed up our priorities are on this issue. But nonetheless, that is a Republican position. A lot of them say, okay, let's give more guns. Let's have more guns, because an armed society is a polite society. How polite is it for everybody to be aiming guns at each other? I don't know. But okay. Now, the poll talked about that. 51% said the shooting could not be prevented if teachers had guns, where 42% said such rules could have stopped it. Okay. So, again, there are some disagreements here, but for the most part, I think the majority is in favor of the more liberal position of let's have some gun control and not go crazy and arm our teachers. Now, this is where there's even more wide agreement, is on the subject of mental health. 77% of respondents said that more effective mental health screening and treatment could have stopped the shooting. That is possible. And for example, this guy, the last shooter, I'm not going to say his name, in Florida, he passed all of his tests, and he got a legal gun, right? So he got his gun legally, but he had a history of mental health issues. So I think a lot of people will go to, okay, look, he had some issues. Maybe a better mental health screen could have prevented him from buying that gun. And that certainly is possible and certainly is plausible. So I guess it makes sense that a lot of people would actually think that. However, this is part of the Republican narrative, and this is what's the problem with this focus just on mental health. Which is not to say that it's not important to talk about mental health, but let me just talk about the framing here. Now, Republicans say that we need to focus specifically on mental health and screening, and don't worry about the gun. The gun's not the problem at all. Guns don't get up and shoot themselves. It's the people. It's a people problem, and specifically it's a crazy person problem. So we just need to control the crazy people, right? Well, the thing is that they use that, but they don't actually support policy that would actually do what they're talking about. And that's a hypocrisy. Let me give you an example here. And this is where you can fault President Trump. Trump's latest budget cuts a major source of public funds for mental health treatment. That's the Medicaid program, by $1.4 trillion over the next 10 years. The budget also calls for a 36% cut to an education department grant program that would support safer schools. It would reduce this grant by $25 million. That is a $25 million cut. Their budget right now is $67.5 million. So we're going to cut mental health services and we're going to cut school safety programs. But let's talk about increasing safety in school and increasing and talk about mental health. Anything but the guns. Come on. Hypocrisy, right? You want to point out mental health as a cause of mass shootings? Okay, let's do that. But if you're going to do that, then don't cut mental health funding. At least be consistent on this issue, but they're not. Look, the best way to deal with mental health, by the way, is to guarantee health care for all Americans under a Medicare for all system. You guarantee health care for all Americans, well, then there you go. Everybody's got treatment. Everybody's got not just access, but everybody who needs it will get mental health care. So there you go. That seems to be a good solution. And look, over 60% of Americans support a plan to enact a single-payer system, so why not do it? Well, it's because they don't actually care. Remember, the NRA spent $30 million helping to elect Trump. And of course, Trump, on Medicare, said, oh, that's a crazy plan. Crazy Bernie and his crazy healthcare plan. It's so crazy to ensure that everybody has healthcare, including mental health care, which could catch people, properly medicate them before they go on a violent rampage, which actually, there's another problem with that narrative as well. And it's the idea that anybody who's mentally ill, that a lot of mentally ill people have the ability to go and shoot up a school, when actually, look, a lot of people with anxiety, a lot of people with depression, they don't go and do mass shootings. Even people with schizophrenia don't go out there and do mass shootings. At least the mental illness isn't the cause of these mass shootings. It's more of societal factors. Again, that last shooter in Florida, he was a social outcast. He was somebody that was vindictive and cruel, and that didn't have anything to do with his mental illness. He was just a terrible shit stain of a person. And you have to be a terrible shit stain of a person to do that kind of thing to other human beings. So, mental health, again, not the only answer here, but on the money. And why they're not, Congress and Trump are not actually doing anything. Gun advocacy groups, and this includes the NRA, spent more than $135 million on lobbying from the years of 1998 to 2017. This is according to the Center for Responsive Politics. That's why Congress isn't doing anything. That's why Trump won't do anything. All you have to do is follow the money. Just follow the money. The NRA gives way more money to politicians than gun control groups do. And look, it's because they have more money. They're backed by the gun manufacturers. They make a profit when people buy guns. When people are more afraid of mass shooters, they buy more guns because they think, well, the gun's going to protect me from a mass shooter. It's going to protect my home from home invaders. And in some cases, yes, there are cases out there where people actually have defended their home against home invaders. Or people have actually, defended against a mass shooter here and there. But I think that's exceedingly rare, and the data that we see points that out, that it's rare. But what we have is that we have a climate of fear, and a climate of fear is actually really, really good for gun sales, for gun manufacturers. And so they have this sick incentive that the more mass shootings you have, the more money you make. That's a really sick incentive. And measures that have been proven to save lives, not by America, but measures that are enacted in other countries that don't have this problem, well, we're going to fight against those because that hurts our bottom line. And less people buying guns, less fear, means less profit. And we cannot have that. And remember, America is an outlier. We are the only country in the developed world without, number one, a single payer healthcare system. So, that covers mental health, right? So we do have people that cannot get mental health treatment. We're also the only country in the developed world without strict gun control. And we have one of the biggest gaps in wages, for example. If you don't think that plays into it, it does. We have no worker protections. So people are overworked, stressed out, economically insecure. There's a lot of stress, anxiety, depression, division, hatred. Look, it's no wonder that in these conditions that there are a lot of people who might actually qualify as being mentally ill. And that a small percentage, and of course that is a small percentage of the people, as I pointed out, but nonetheless, all this stuff comes together into a toxic soup that makes it actually likely. And then you throw in all the guns that we have, more guns than people. Well, then this soup just got deadly. So there's not just one thing that's going to fix this problem, though. There's no magic bullet, no pun intended. Gun control, I think, is a good start because it might actually help solve a lot of the problem. Because I think one of the biggest problems here is you have the guns. But there are a lot of other different problems that are affecting this. Again, no access to be able to have mental health care. You've got a society that is, of course, based on fear. Fear of other, division, and of course you have money in politics, which is preventing congressional action on things that are actually popular with most of the American people. So I would say the biggest problem is money in politics, followed by the fact that we have too many guns and loose gun laws, and then followed by mental health, and then of course our society. So maybe part of the solution first has to be the fact that we should demand or elect politicians that are not afraid to take in the gun lobby, that don't take money from the NRA. And that those people will enact some stronger gun control measures. That would be the first step. Unfortunately, that's the hardest step to take. But right now, it's pretty clear that our Congress and our president, they are controlled by the money, and therefore they won't even take the most basic steps to be able to solve this actual problem. So we got to get the money out of politics. We got to vote for real progressives who are actually planning on doing something about this. And again, not just about guns, but doing stuff about mental health and all the other factors that contribute. We can't just focus on one thing at a time. We've got to hit them all. And we got to do it soon. Because this is unacceptable. Okay. I'm sure I've got a lot of gun people mad at me, but again, I said nothing about taking away people's guns. Just making sure that some of them don't get into the hands of people that, shouldn't have them. But anyway, so what I'm going to do, I got more stories, but first I'm going to take a break real quick here. So stay right here. If you haven't already, please like and share this stream. And maybe, I don't know, never mind. So let's go to a break. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here, TYT Nation. Again, if you haven't already, please give us a like and a share. Thanks again to everybody who's engaging in the comments. I'm seeing a lot of discussion about guns. And look, there you go. It's good that there's discussion because this is something that needs to be talked about. And I'm glad the discussion is actually being somewhat respectful. So that is great because we need to have a rational discussion on this based on facts and not hyperbole and not, bullshit. So we go from that to Russiagate. Yes, we've got a couple of Russiagate stories here to end the day with, so prepare to get angry. Probably at me for covering it, but I think it's important. So, and you'll see why. Okay. So last week it was reported that Robert Mueller had indicted 13 Russian billionaires for their role in interfering with the 2016 election. Now, it is alleged that these billionaires and several companies had operated or funded troll farms that were used on social media. So for one, they infiltrated social media groups and also were fake accounts that would spread fake news against Hillary Clinton. Now, one of these groups, these troll farms, was the Internet Research Agency. Now, they'd have bought about $100,000 worth of Facebook ads. Okay. Now, you might think, whoa, holy crap, $100,000 worth of Facebook ads. Well, remember, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump bought millions of dollars with Facebook ads, worth of Facebook ads. So really, what they spent compared to the Internet Research Agency is peanuts. But nonetheless, okay, that is a troll farm. That is a Russian troll farm. And they bought social media ads that are apparently pro Bernie Sanders and anti Hillary Clinton and pro Jill Stein. All right. So, hey, there seems to be no question now. That is what they did. Okay. They, again, infiltrated Facebook groups. And look, I know that was happened because I was part of some of those Facebook groups. And I did see this happen. And you have admins of big pages, for example, Lily Starling, saying that, look, we had to weed out a ton of fake Facebook accounts. There was a lot of spam accounts, and there were some of these really questionable accounts, right? With, there were like these accounts that would post the same thing across many different pages, the same links to these spam sites and things like that. So they had to weed them out. And you do a simple who is lookup, and you find out that a lot of these came from Macedonia. Okay. Now, as I said, a lot of these were clickbait sites, but some of them, I'm assuming, were there to spread misinformation. Okay. Now, some of these groups that got infiltrated successfully with the help of some moderators that were a bit opportunistic or gullible or whatever, these pages got taken over by some of these trolls. But it wasn't just Russian trolls. Russians aren't the only ones that have done this. And I go back to, in fact, Russians aren't the only ones who've operated troll farms. For that, I go back to David Brock's group, Correct the Record, during the primary, was also a troll farm. Now, as opposed to $100,000 worth of ads, David Brock apparently paid $1 million just to do their own troll farm that was pro-Hillary Clinton. So the Russians, yes, they did this, but Hillary Clinton's campaign also did this to a larger extent. Interesting. So again, we know this happened. Right now, I don't have any, there's no question here, okay? Now, the effectiveness, well, that's a different issue. But the report also claimed that Russian bots and trolls might have helped the campaigns of Jill Stein and Bernie Sanders. Huh, interesting. Now, okay. So, my opinion on this is, would they have done this? Yes. I actually do think they actually tried to do this, and again, infiltrated the group. Now, it's not necessarily to help out Bernie Sanders, but to go after Hillary Clinton. Okay, that would make sense. Now, I want to go to a clip here from Bernie Sanders, who talked about this, and yes, he validated the Mueller report by saying this. Watch.
when it appeared that Clinton was going to win, and certainly after she won the nomination. What the Russians were doing is flocking to Bernie Sanders' Facebook sites, and they were saying to Bernie Sanders supporters, as they were, by the way, to Black Lives Matter supporters, people who are fighting for social justice, as they were saying to the Muslim community, if you voted for Sanders, you have to understand Hillary Clinton is crazy, she's a murderer, she is terrible, all kinds of horrible, horrible things about Hillary Clinton. And it turns out that one of our social media guys in San Diego actually went to the Clinton campaign in September and said something weird is going on. Bernie's not in the campaign. Hundreds of these people are now coming onto his Facebook site. So I think we already knew that. It was an effort to undermine American democracy and to really say horrible things about Secretary Clinton.
Again, no question, right? Bernie knew this was going on and is like, oh, that's weird. His campaign knew and is like, they even warned the Clinton campaign, man, we got some weird-ass trolls that are posting some pretty crazy things about you. Just watch out. Okay, so no question, right? Now the question is, how effective? Well, the Democratic establishment and a lot of their consultants want you to think it's very, very effective, but it was $100,000 in Facebook ads. Again, that's compared to Clinton's billion-dollar campaign. So there's a bit of a disparity. It's almost as if people didn't like or trust Hillary Clinton before the Russians started spreading fake news about Hillary Clinton. And I wonder why. Well, look, it's because we knew what she was about. And that she's basically someone who's rich, out of touch, establishment. We didn't like that. 2016 was a change election, which means that people were looking at the status quo and saying, you know what, this isn't actually working for me. Let's try somebody else. Let's try somebody else who is working as a populist. Again, right-wing populist running on demagoguery and fear of the other, but nonetheless an attempted populist. Okay. And then Hillary Clinton, on the other hand, she loved the banks, whereas Donald Trump went against the banks. And then when he won, he was like, suckers, you guys are idiots. I'm going to fill my entire cabinet with Goldman Sachs. All right. So, but Hillary loved the banks. She loved Goldman Sachs Corporation. She played the game. She did very, very well at the game. She's excellent at that. And her family made billions of dollars working Washington. The only thing that she couldn't work was the people. So nobody with a brain thought that if she got elected that she would change that system. And it turns out Americans were very, very upset at the corruption. Now, the Russians didn't convince people not to trust Hillary. That distrust and disinterest was already there because the more you find out about Hillary Clinton, the less popular she is, the less you get to like her. The Russians did not force people to flock to Bernie Sanders. Hillary Clinton did that on her own. Those stadiums filled with Sanders supporters, they weren't Russians. So I just want to point that out. But let me tell you what could be the Russians, though. This is my own little conspiracy theory. The people who made the sexist attacks against Hillary Clinton, you know, the same sexist attacks that the establishment loved to blame on Bernie Sanders supporters, maybe those people were the Russians. Maybe those people were making Bernie Sanders supporters look bad, look like sexist tools. That's just my own little conspiracy theory. But no, during the primary, it wasn't the Russians that helped Bernie Sanders close a 60-point gap with Hillary Clinton. That's not the Russians' fault. So I highly doubt that Facebook ads made a big difference in this election. Many of those bots and trolls, I think, were pretty easy to spot and easy to discount. And likely, even though they probably did sway a few people, I don't think it was quite as many as establishment media likes to point out. Besides, the people that didn't want to vote for Hillary likely wouldn't have voted for Hillary anyway. Just like there were Hillary voters that didn't want to vote for Obama after that primary. So what likely made a big difference, though, I think, in this election, and this is something that doesn't get talked about enough. When we talk about Russiagate, the Russians swayed the election because they did it with their propaganda. No, what likely swung the election is something that nobody talks about. That's voter suppression. interstate cross-check, the closing of polling places, especially in minority areas, voter ID laws. That's actually a much bigger assault on democracy. And I am kind of disagreeing with Sanders a bit here. I think that's more of an attack on our democracy than Russian troll farms. And yet the media completely misses it. Instead, they go to Russiagate. Now, why? Because that narrative helps the establishment. And not only that, not only does it help the Democratic establishment downplay the fact that they lost to an orange clown, but it also helps Republicans who will continue assaulting democracy by making sure that less people are able to vote. I think it's much more of an assault on democracy when you take away someone's right to vote based on an ID, based on the fake news that there is massive voter fraud. We have completely forgotten about this. As I said, on the left, in the media, in the establishment media, completely forgotten and completely ignore all the voter suppression that Republicans have put into place, all the gerrymandered maps that Republicans put into place, all the dirty tricks that the Republicans use. We're not talking about that. We're talking about Russiagate. What the hell? Yes, they tried to influence our election, and they shouldn't do that. But at the same time, the people that are really messing with elections are those that are not allowing fellow citizens to vote. So the Republicans are hurting democracy. And it's not Russians that are making it hard for Americans to vote. It's Americans making it hard for Americans to vote. All Russia did was try to exploit our own personal divisions that we had and our own willingness to accept fake news as long as it benefits our own side. And there was fake news mostly on the right, but it did exist on the left as well. I mean, for example, all the Clinton body count stuff. Crazy pants, right? There's more than enough real reasons that you can fact check to dislike Hillary Clinton, which is why I think most real Sanders supporters were not buying a lot of this fake news. And they either sucked it up or voted for Clinton, or they said, hey, look, I know the reality about Hillary Clinton. I want change, so I will vote for Jill Stein. And here's one thing that I'm tired of on that. I'm tired of the vote shaming on both sides. I'm tired of the people shaming Jill Stein voters for voting for Jill Stein. That's your vote. You can do whatever the hell you want with it. You can vote for whoever you want. That's called freedom. At the same time, I'm not going to, don't shame people who voted for Hillary Clinton by thinking hey, man, look, I don't want Trump. Let's not do the vote shaming on both sides. Your vote is your vote. Whatever reason you use to vote, that's your reason. And so don't shame somebody for it. Just don't. Your vote is yours. And don't tell other people how to vote. Just tell people to vote. That's what's important here. But look, as I said, people voted for Jill Stein and didn't vote for Hillary Clinton, not because of the Russians, but it's because Hillary Clinton ran a terrible campaign in which Hillary Clinton ignored progressives and progressive priorities. She told Bernie Sanders supporters, I don't need you guys. I don't need you. I don't want you. And then later on, it's, we need you. We want you. Actually, that was Claire McCaskill. But nonetheless, yet you kind of needed Bernie Sanders supporters. The fact is, Russian interference, which we know is true or not, this election should never have been this close in the first place. That's not the fault of Russian propaganda. That's the fault of the Clinton campaign. And that's a fact. Okay. We got election meddling. We're going to continue with election meddling. Okay. Now, with the recent Mueller indictment against the creators of certain Russian troll farms with the goal of meddling in America's elections, a lot of people are shocked and horrified that a country could dare to try to influence another country's democratic process. Wait until they find out who the biggest election meddler actually is. According to intelligence veterans, and scholars who have studied covert operations, turns out the horrible attack on American democracy by the Russians is actually no different than what America has been known all over the world for doing. Interesting. Now, this is an opinion piece in the New York Times. It's excellent. They talked to Stephen L. Hall, right? Different intelligence experts and other scholars on this issue. They asked him about, okay, look, did America influence and meddle in other people's elections? Again, the answer is yes. In fact, Stephen L. Hall retired in 2015 after 30 years at the CIA, so he was a CIA veteran, and he was the chief of Russian operations, so he might actually know a bit about this. He said, if you ask an intelligence officer, did the Russians break rules or do something bizarre? The answer is no, not at all. The United States absolutely has carried out such election influence operations historically. And he added, I hope we keep doing it. So understand, this is a CIA guy, career CIA guy, saying, yeah, you know what the Russians did is pretty normal, interfering in our elections, because we do it too. And I hope we keep doing it, because apparently that's what the CIA wants to do, is meddle in other elections. So much for being shocked and chagrined, right? See, here's the thing. That's just the media narrative, right? It's the media narrative, and it's the Democratic establishment trying to blame their loss, an incredibly embarrassing loss, on Russian trolls and their army of memes, when in reality, the Clinton campaign was poorly run. They didn't campaign in Michigan and Wisconsin. That's not Russia's fault. They had an incredible amount of hubris. The fact that, no, we can't lose to this guy. Nobody can lose to this guy. Well, you did. And again, it's partly due to terrible election consultants that are overpaid. They get paid whatever if they win or not. And a candidate that was, of course, incredibly unpopular and distrusted and disliked for many legitimate and some not so legitimate reasons. So now we have another expert. Now, this is Locke Johnson. Now, he's the Dean of American Intelligence Scholars. Now, his opinion on Russia is much the same. He said that Russia's 2016 operation was simply the cyber age version of a standard United States practice for decades, whenever American officials were worried about the results of a foreign vote. He said, quote, "We've been doing this kind of thing since the CIA was created in 1947. We used posters, pamphlets, mailers, banners, you name it. We've planted false information in foreign newspapers. We've used what the British call King George's cavalry, which is another name for suitcases full of cash." Not only that, but in the 1950s, the CIA used other methods, which would include overthrowing elected leaders in both Iran and Guatemala, and backing violent coups in other South American countries back in the 1960s. It also plotted political assassinations and supported brutal anti-communist governments in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. So, look, you want to think that Russia is bad. What they did in the 2016 election with troll farms and memes? Look at what we've done. We've overthrown entire governments. Now, these guys, of course, Mr. Hall and Mr. Johnson say, well, no, look, yeah, we used to be terrible, but now, I mean, you can't even make a comparison because we are doing it in the case of freedom. Interesting. He says, American interventions have generally been aimed at helping non-authoritarian candidates challenge dictators or otherwise promoting democracy. Russia has more often intervened to disrupt democracy or promote authoritarian rule. But there's a little bit of a problem with that argument and something that I disagree with. Look at our track record, right? Well, look at Libya, for example. Libya, we were like, oh, we've got to overthrow the dictator Gaddafi and do some more, and actually introduce some democracy. Well, guess what happened? We actually made the country worse by doing so. We also overthrew the government of Iraq. So here you have a brutal dictator, Saddam Hussein. Now, yes, part of it was promoting democracy. The other part was, 9/11, which they didn't actually attack us in 9/11. They had nothing to do with 9/11. So it quickly changed from weapons of mass destruction, 9/11, to we're promoting democracy and freedom. But when we did that, we created something far worse. ISIS. So, look, if you want to tell me that we're better than the Russians because we're trying to promote democracy, I'm not buying it because, again, look at our track record. Look at the real reasons we actually do things. Iraq was about oil. Libya, probably also about oil. It's funny how that works. Syria, now you could say that, and there's a narrative about it being about natural gas or a pipeline. I'm sure that actually does play into it, but I think it actually goes more into complex military alliances and sectarian conflicts. So that one's a bit more involved. Not only that, but climate change actually played a role in the conflict in Syria as well. But that's not why we got involved. We didn't get involved by saying, by worrying about, oh my God, look at these poor people suffering from the effects of climate change. No, we're like, Russians are involved. And also, we've got different alliances in this area. We don't like Bashar al-Assad. So, we'll figure something out. So, nonetheless, the whole point is, when American interests are at stake, we're more than happy to remove leaders for our own benefit and sell it as spreading democracy or humanitarian rights or all that stuff. So, that's what these guys, Mr. Hull and Mr. Johnson, are arguing. Again, I don't agree with that. Now, we've done this more than the Russians. Now, the Russians, to be fair, they're trying to step up their game. They're like, oh yeah? Yep, we can meddle in the elections too. So that's what we're going to try and do. Now, a Carnegie Mellon scholar, Don H. Levin, he actually looked at the records, right, for both overt and covert election influence operations. What he found is that the United States had perpetuated 81 covert and overt election interference operations. So that's how many we've conducted. The Soviet Union and Russia, between 1946 and 2000, actually did about 36. So 81 to 36. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't more. Russia could have done more. The United States could have been more. Those are just the ones that we actually know of. Now, Mr. Levin said, quote, "I'm not in any way justifying what the Russians did in 2016. It was completely wrong of Vladimir Putin to interfere in this way. That said, the methods they used in this election were the digital version of methods used by the United States and Russia for decades, breaking into party headquarters, recruiting secretaries, placing informants in a party, giving information or disinformation to newspapers." So again, you can not downplay what Russia has done. And I don't want to downplay that. No, Vladimir Putin is a brutal dictator. And the government of Russia is hyper-capitalist. They're not some left-wing utopia, okay? No, they're hard right-wingers. They imprison journalists. And a lot of Putin's opponents mysteriously end up dead. That said, America has also done terrible things, okay? So the methods, by the way, those are important here, right? Now, the methods involve sometimes willing participants as well as non-willing participants, okay? So that's important, especially in the context of the Mueller investigation and what they have so far found, that there are some people that were unwilling participants in these efforts. But there's more. Back in the 1940s and 50s, the United States used to send assistance to non-communist candidates in other countries. Now, Mark Wyatt, former CIA officer in a 1996 interview, admitted that, quote, "We had bags of money that were delivered to selected politicians to defray their expenses." Sending money to foreign politicians, that's election meddling. And look, it probably goes further because that money was probably used for ads. So disinformation or information ads. Okay. But there are more covert methods that they actually use other than just sending money. Richard M. Bissell Jr., who ran the agency's operation in the late 1950s and early 1960s, wrote in his autobiography of, quote, "exercising control over a newspaper or broadcasting station, or of securing the desired outcome of an election." This self-congratulatory declassified report on the CIA's work in Chile in 1964 election boasted the hard work the agency did supplying large sums to its favored candidate and portraying him as a wise, sincere, and high-minded statesman, while also painting his leftist opponent as a calculating schemer. Apparently that seems to have been effective. CIA officials also told Mr. Johnson in the late 1980s that insertions or information into foreign news media, mostly accurate but sometimes false, were running at 70 to 80 a day. In the 1990 election in Nicaragua, the CIA planted stories about corruption in the Sandinista government, and of course the opposition ended up winning. So, interesting. So that's a lot of what we did, but that's not just the CIA, though. The Department of State and its affiliates have also meddled in other elections. For example, in the 2000 election of Serbia, the United States funded a successful effort to defeat Slobodan Milosevic. Now, that guy is a horrible leader, he's a nationalist, and what they did, or what we did, I should say, is that we provided political consultants and also millions of stickers with the opposition's clenched fist symbol, and he's finished in Serbian printed on 80 tons of adhesive paper and delivered by a Washington contractor. So, Vince Houghton served in the military in the Balkans at the time and worked closely with intelligence, said he saw the American efforts everywhere. Quote, "We made it very clear that we had no intention of letting Milosevic stay in power." So, look, again, that's clear election meddling, right? Was it effective? I'm not exactly sure. And I don't agree with any sort of meddling. I don't agree with Russian meddling. I don't agree with the United States meddling in other people's elections. But there's no question that we do it. We all do it. Every country does it because they want something. Now, here's more examples. Iraq and Afghanistan. And this is after we invaded. We still try to control the country. For example, after Hamid Karzai was reelected as president of Afghanistan in 2009, he complained to Robert Gates, then the Secretary of Defense, about the U.S. attempt to defeat him, which Mr. Gates calls in his memoir, quote, "our clumsy and failed push." Not only that, but it turns out we have meddled in Russian elections. Oh dear God, no. American fears that Boris Yeltsin would be defeated for re-election as president in 1996 by an old-fashioned communist led to an overt and covert effort to help him, urged on by President Bill Clinton. This included an American push for $10 billion in International Monetary Fund loan to Russia 4 months before the voting, and a team of American political consultants. So we helped Russian candidate Boris Yeltsin win his campaign against communists. That's super blatant. We helped a campaign against the communists. So, yes, we have done this. There's a quote here from Thomas Carruthers. Now, he's a scholar at the Carnegie Institute for International Peace. Now, he recalls, during this operation, that some people were very uncomfortable with it. One State Department official told him, quote, "Yeltsin is democracy in Russia," to which Mr. Carruthers said he replied, "That's not what democracy means. Meddling in an election, giving money to a preferred candidate, and you want to talk about democracy, right? Well, you have already interfered in their democratic process. The same thing that we accuse Russia of doing today, which I actually do believe that they have done. So yes, we've meddled in elections. Sometimes it's justified, well, they justify it as trying to do the right thing, right? Now, others, of course, the vast majority, I believe, in my opinion, cannot be justified because it was an effort to maintain or either to get access to resources or to have some sort of strategic military advantage for the United States of America. That, I think, is what the Russians were ultimately trying to do in 2016. They were trying to get some sort of advantage. Wouldn't that make sense? Yes, get a friendly leadership in place so that maybe we can get something from them or make it easier to get something from them. It's no secret that President Trump has done business deals privately with Russia. Legitimate business deals, sure. For example, various plans for hotels and, of course, doing the Miss Universe pageant in Russia. So, of course, yes, deals. And that's what Donald Trump was doing when he was a private citizen. He was doing business deals, and sometimes he did deals with other countries, Russia, Saudi Arabia also, which, of course, Saudi Arabia now gets preferential treatment as well from the Trump campaign or from the Trump administration. So you have those deals. You have deals now with Russian billionaires going and buying up real estate from Trump really cheap. Now, that, of course, could be possible money laundering, but we don't know the specifics there. So I think, based on those past deals, hey, man, look, I think, to me, it seems obvious that he is someone, at the very least, who would be open to making deals to benefit Russia. Because, look, he loves making deals, right? He wants to make deals. If Russia comes to him with a deal about, for example, pipelines or fossil fuels or whatever, or working together in Syria, absolutely. I love making deals, right? Everybody loves it when I make deals. I make the best deals. There doesn't have to be collusion for you to see that. There couldn't be collusion, or there might not be collusion. There might not be any secret deals. I'm not saying there isn't, but I'm not saying 100% that there is either. Personally, I do think there is, but I can't prove it. But there doesn't have to be any of these secret deals for Trump to be willing to make deals with Russia. Because, again, he likes making deals, and generally he has a more friendly sort of demeanor towards Russia himself. For example, he doesn't want to do sanctions put on Russia because he doesn't believe, again, in this election meddling narrative. And also, there is, again, some thoughts that he may have had some deals, but again, I don't know for sure. But Trump, as I said, is seen as more of a friendly sort of face towards Russia. Hillary Clinton, not so friendly. Now, here's another thing that doesn't get talked about a lot, right? So Hillary Clinton, one of the problems that progressives had with her is that she pushed fracking all over the world. And that's obviously a huge, huge problem. Now, she tried to push it in places like Europe. Now, why? Well, number one, obviously because of the money. Follow the money, right? But you also got to look at geopolitical stuff, right? American gas companies actually wanted to cut in on Russia's natural gas business. So Russia was supplying Europe. Now, our companies wanted in. If our companies want in, they're going to take the competition from Russian companies. Now, of course, Hillary also had other reasons to despise Russia, of course. So it seems like it would be in their best interest to not get Hillary elected. So what are they going to do? They're going to derail Hillary and get somebody that they can deal with. And look, originally before the Russian sanctions, ExxonMobil wanted to push a $500 million, I think it's either a $500 million or a $500 billion deal with Russia over oil. So it's in their financial interest. So yes, I could see why Russia would actually be very interested in having somebody, hey, we can make deals with, we can, do fossil fuel deals and things like that. Great. He is a more friendly leader. Maybe let's give him a little bit of a push. I don't know. But the whole lesson here is we meddle, they meddle. This isn't a new thing, and they all do it to get an advantage over other countries. It makes sense. So knowing this, of course, we would meddle for our own benefit, and they would meddle for their own benefit. So now the question is, what do we do about it? Well, I think that we make our system better to protect against possible misinformation and meddling. Now, for one, look, if you're worrying about election hacking and penetration into voting systems, well, if you're so worried about it, then you should support, at least on principle, and there are plenty of other better reasons to support it. But I'm just saying, if you're worried about this, well then, okay, hand-counted paper ballots that are accountable, fully accountable, that are, counted by independent election experts to make sure that you can verify everything, that there is a paper trail on your votes. That way you don't have to worry about some, oligarch or whatever coming in and stealing your vote. No, it would actually make the election system more efficient and more accountable. There were problems with these voting machines being hackable and changeable far before the 2016 election. So let's change it. Let's fix that issue. Let's fix that system. Not only that, but look, as I said, making sure everyone should be able to vote. That's another fix we can make to the system. So that if there is any sort of interference or whatever, that more Americans are involved. That it doesn't allow a small group of people to get swayed by another government or whatever to influence the outcome of the election. So, because that, voter suppression, that I think is the real threat against our democracy, not Russian hacking, which we've had for, again, a long time, which we have also done in other countries. I think the real threat is people being blocked by voter ID laws. Voter suppression is the real way you steal an election. And that's not the fault of the Russians. So let's maybe fix that. Okay. I know I went really, really long on this. But you guys wanted me to cover Russiagate. There it is. And I think most of you probably did not want me to cover Russiagate, but I thought that was an important story regardless. So, anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. We'll be back tomorrow. Hopefully we'll have Ron Placone on. He missed last week, so hopefully we'll have him tomorrow. Okay. If you haven't already, please like and share this stream. Please like and share the videos. There is a thing, right? So, it's called subscriber burn. Okay, so guys, if you're not watching the videos, then notifications will not come up on videos. So I know a lot of you guys have been talking about, hey man, look, I'm not getting notifications for videos. Well, I think that has something to do with if you're not engaging or watching the content, then it's going to show up less and less in your feed. So please like and share the videos, you know, comment on them later and things like that, and you'll get all your notifications. So, okay. That's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place, right here, youtube.com/TYTNation, also on Facebook as well. Thank you all. We'll see you tomorrow. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation.